cyber attacks. And this is one of the biggest risks that we're seeing in business. And as you saw from the Target case, we'll get into, this is expensive. This costs firms a lot of money, not only to prepare for it, meaning the antivirus software and the security that you have to use, but also what happens if something bad occurs. What are the after effects? Is our stock price going to go down? Are people going to get fired? Are our customers going to leave us? Are they never going to come back? So it's terrible on a number of different levels. And so what we're seeing here, so again, is the marketing class. You're like, okay, isn't this like IT stuff? Why are we talking about this? Well, one of the things you should have with an MBA is, because an MBA is not a master's in marketing. It's not a master's in management. It's not a master's in finance. It's a master's in business, meaning you should be somewhat well-versed in all the business areas, which is why you have to take a finance, an accounting, a management, a marketing, and in some cases more than one of those classes. So it's supposed to give you a taste, a flavor of all the different areas of business. In the real world, a lot of these areas have to work together. And so in possessing an MBA, we want you to have a firm understanding of not only, for example, not only marketing strategy, but how does some of marketing and other areas, how do they overlap? How do they relate? And marketing's purpose is to exchange offerings that have value. I told you the first day, or I can shorten that to 2 words. Marketing is providing value, meaning that if I can provide you value, if I can build value into what I'm offering you, I can create hopefully a long-term relationship, and hopefully I can maintain that relationship. Well, what do you think happens to that customer-company relationship if a firm can't protect its customers' data, and subsequently something bad happens to the customer? And so that's why I wanted to put this week in here and talk about this. Obviously, nothing good can come of that. So this graph has nothing to do with Target. This is showing you, I'm going to minimize our little window thingamabob here. There we go. All right, so this is showing us that darker line on the bottom there, that is the number in millions of records that were exposed or captured due to data breaches. And it goes year by year. This is about the last 15 years. And the top line, that brighter blue line, that is just the number of data breaches. And as you can see, at least if you look at the blue line, the top line, this lighter blue line, brighter blue line, it's not a perfect linear line, but it's basically going something like this. There was a strong upward trend over the last 10 to 15 years. There's some peaks and valleys, but and you may say, well, since there's more cloud computing, why does this constantly go up? Well, it doesn't constantly go up because we are getting somewhat better trying to defend stuff. But guess what happens as soon as, and if you had time to watch the TED Talk, Caleb Barlow, if you didn't, you should go back and watch that. It's a really informative, entertaining 15-minute talk. But as he talked about, as quickly as they find something out, there's new stuff always evolving. It's not like we can do something now and we're set forever. We can have security, we can have security teams monitoring something, but we can only do so much before the next new thing comes out. And then we have to start from square one to a degree. And so if a customer falls victim to a data breach and you are that customer, your information gets captured and something bad comes of that, that's not going to be good. That's not going to be positive for your relationship with that particular company. And so with that, we can talk a little bit more about Target. So I put together here this graphic, and to be fair, I didn't put it together. IBM developed this graphic. I added some dates in though, just to give you, just to put into some context regarding a timeline. So if we start right over here, this stormtrooper, weird-looking, alien-looking thing, that's supposed to be the attacker. I guess he or she looks mean with that costume on. And so that's step one. This is what happened. There was a mechanical service, as you read in the case. Fazio Mechanical Services. I can't remember what they do. I think it's probably something janitorial or heating and cooling, something like that. They had a contract with Target. Any big retailer, Walmart does this, Target does this, Home Depot does this. They will have separate systems that their contractors can log into for billing purposes and for communication purposes. It's not the homepage. It's not a front-facing customer touch point. It's more of a back-end touch point. And so the hacker, the data breach people, they actually had a phishing attack. Somebody at Fazio clicked on a link they shouldn't have. And in doing so, the attackers now had access to the login credentials that Fazio uses to log in to Target server, one of Target's server. Not the ultimate one where it keeps all the credit cards and all that stuff, but one of the many internal touch points into Target. So that was about, they estimate about September 2013. Fazio suffered the phishing attack, and then the attackers subsequently were able to capture the login information. And about 2 months later, they estimate November 15th, the attackers then used the stolen credentials to log into Target's server. And in doing so, and I'm right here, step number 2. I don't know if you can see me moving my mouse right there. In doing so, now they had access, like I said, to Target's internal software, or I'm sorry, one of Target's internal servers. And then these next few steps, so this pinkish box with the reddish line, outline, this all happened once they're able to get into one of the servers and infect some of the internal Windows servers. So on November 30th, they're able to gain access to the retail Windows file server, so 3A. So this is a multi-pronged attack, what happened with Target's data breach, meaning they, and I want to look at you when I talk about this for a moment. There you are. Okay. I'm not a hacker. I used to be a programmer. I used to be a lot better at building stuff. So I can talk the talk a little bit, but I can't tell you the nuances as far as how all this stuff works. I can break it down in basic language. So what ended up happening was a multi-pronged attack, meaning you had some people that just went through steps 1, 2, 3, 3A, 3B. They were able to gain login access and go into the system through that doorway. But then for this attack to happen, something had to be planted on the front end point of sales where you check out at the store on those particular machines. And one thing, I don't know how they did it, but one thing they could have done, this can be done, is if you ever, next time you go to Target, well, you probably won't see it at Target, not now. Next time you go to a store, I was at Rouse's the other day and I was peeking around. I thought I saw it. Whenever you're checking out, if you look at the cash register or the back of the cash register or the back of the monitor, just notice if you see an empty USB port. Just a little USB, you plug in your, whatever device or your little thumb drive. Just note if you see one. And if you do, and if it is within arm's reach, somebody could very easily just momentarily distract the cashier, such as, hey, how much is that blouse over there? The cashier turns around. As the cashier is distracted, someone really quickly, boom, boom, puts in a device. Depending on, again, the sophistication of the hacker, once that device is in, it could start to load something. It could infect something. Now, having said that, most retail front-facing systems should have software that should immediately recognize, wait, something was just inserted. Hold on, hold the phone. And alarms should go off, bells and whistles, and well, maybe not a physical alarm, but the attack should not work. But if you are unprotected, if you have not done anything, it is possible somebody to just insert that USB device and then your front end machine somehow gets hacked or infected at that moment. And there's a lot of variations to that as well. I'm going to minimize this to go back to our graphic here. So that's what happened. Not only did we gain access through Fazio's login credentials to get into the servers, something was also planted on the point of sale systems. Some malware was planted. And what this malware did, simply as people were swiping their credit card, it was something called screen scraping, which can mean a lot of things. But in plain language, as people were inserting their credit card information, the credit card information is being captured by the attackers. And that was being sent back somewhere within Target servers to a place on Target servers where it made it easy to go to step 6, to get it off Target servers, get it out the door, and to the attackers' FTP servers that, lo and behold, were existing in Russia. And that's basically what happened. So this whole time frame, let's see. So Fazio, the phishing attack, the login on November 15th, accessing the servers on the 30th, as well as the front-end attacks on the 30th. So within 2 or 3 days, it started to spit out customers' credit cards onto the Russian servers. And that's not good. That is a problem if you're Target, and that is a problem if you're customers. on a number of fronts, not just because it's right before Christmas, as the case noted, but you don't want someone who you know is breaking the law, who's going to break the law, to have access to your credit cards. Target learned of the breach. Target, by the way, didn't learn of the breach on the 30th. It didn't learn of the breach on the 2nd. It learned of it about 11 or 12 days later on the 13th. And it didn't, let me be careful how I phrase this. Target did not learn, Target had internal software that was designed to set off the alarms for this to happen. And it did. It set off the alarms. The only problem was the people that were watching it, so the IT staff, they thought it was a false alarm. There were some features of the software that they elected not to turn on because it was new or they didn't understand. And when the alarm started to go off, they thought it was a false alarm. They just they weren't fully trained on understanding. And so this all could have been nipped in the bud somewhere right around probably between the 15th and the 30th. Software was installed for Target to do that, but it failed. Not the software, but the humans failed to take action. Target didn't learn of the breach until the government came along and said, there's a lot of people getting illegal charges of their credit cards. And you hear about contact tracing now with the pandemic. What ended up happening, a lot of the law enforcement traced, and they found that a lot of these customers have been hacked. They all had a common source, and that they were all within a few days at Target. And that's how they were able to, the government was able to find out. So it wasn't Target finding the attackers. It wasn't the software finding the attackers. It was the government knocking on the door saying, hey, you're kind of screwing things up here. Do you know that all your credit card from your customers are being stolen? Target didn't know up until that point. Now, Target did, they were informed on the 13th. They didn't tell customers on the 13th. They waited about a week before they informed customers, which probably is not a good thing. If someone halfway around the world has my credit card information, I don't want to give them 6 days lead time, looking at it from the customer perspective. So with that, I want to involve some of you now. Let me bring some of your faces back up here. Help me out here. So let me minimize this. Just give me a moment here. Pull you down here. Your first question that I asked you to answer. This has nothing to do with Target. This is just you. What can happen if a hacker captures your personal data? And does anyone want to volunteer?
I got you.
Bethany, okay.
Well, if like the hacker catches my data, I mean, they can sell me on the dark web. That even that article or the case study that we read, he gave us the website, which I really wanted to go look at, but I was too scared to. But once they have my data, they could sell it, and then somebody else can use it. Destroy my credit score, other terrible things, I'm sure.
Yeah, speaking of the dark web, if you don't know what that is, it's the underbelly of the internet. It's where all you can buy cocaine. You can literally buy anything or do anything on it. It's not a good place. Don't go there. I'm not telling you to buy cocaine. Don't do that. Just for clarity. How much do you think on the dark web? How much does it cost to buy a social security number? What do you think?
$100.
It's about $1 or $2.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, so I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm gonna be. There's the Target mentioned the Equifax hack, and I mean, there's been at least 1 or 2 major credit card hacks. There's people that they're not just people. There's organized crime organizations that are filled with very smart PhD level educated people. This isn't just some 8th grade dropout who's a computer genius in his mom's basement. I mean, this is a very sophisticated deal that's going on. I would be shocked if not every single solitary person's information in the country has not already been captured at least once. I'm talking about social security numbers, mother maiden name, addresses, phone numbers, credit card numbers. And so if it's been captured once it's not like there's an undo button. It's not like, oh, we've taken care of it. No, you've taken care of it, but there's been copies made of all that data. And so your Social Security alone, you don't want somebody to have that. There's only so much people can do with it. They need multiple pieces of information to really inflict harm. But I was shocked to find out that it's only $1 or $2 to buy.
The reason in part that it's only $1 is part to fail rate of those Social Security numbers. So yeah, you got to combine those, but it's also due to currency exchange. So compared to the ruble, I think it's 700 rubles to $1 or something like that.
And usually you have to buy like 1 million of them or 100,000.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't say, hey, give me 3 Social Security numbers. I mean, maybe you can, but usually an attacker will buy a lot of like 1 million of them, and a lot of them they'll have trouble with, but some of them they'll succeed in doing whatever they want to do. Okay, so Bethany, thank you. So your information could be captured, sold in the dark web. Who else? Anybody else want to volunteer? If your information gets captured in a data breach, what do you think can happen? Brendan?
In the case it happened that the people's cards got frozen, and it was during holiday season, so it created that inconvenience as a minor point. But then, where the bank's responsibility kind of ended there and freezing the card and facing the cost of replacing it, the customer then, I believe, is still responsible for going through the expense and time and whatever physical expense and mailing to get those accounts closed out and provide evidence that any charges made were not them, and kind of relieve themselves of liability. That all falls on the consumer as well.
Yeah, so it's an inconvenience. It's not an inconvenience. Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. Your information being sold on the dark web is obviously an inconvenience. But you wanted to buy your Christmas presents, and now you can't. At least not easily. That's an inconvenience. So definitely. Anyone else? Christian, I see you made it. How you doing? You want to comment on this, or did you just join us? Did you know the question I was asking?
Yeah. So I had noted that it could get to an extreme where, as Bethany mentioned, like they could, affect your credit score, but they could lead you to bankruptcy ultimately, because they could take all the money out of your account and more, and just run up a lot of debt on your account.
Yeah.
There's also this wasn't actually because of identity theft, but the Social Security company messed up and declared my dad dead. So my mother got a letter in the mail from the Social Security people that said my father was dead while he was standing.
Your dad was not dead?
No.
Your
dad? He was fine.
Okay.
He was standing right there. But they still threw a wake for him. You gotta party. But it was crazy because there isn't really a mechanism for the Social Security people to pull back information like that. So they had pushed out this update to all like government agencies, state agencies, and it took my dad like many months to prove that he was alive to all these various entities that he interacts with. Everyone from like the driver's license office to like the place where he buys cigars on the internet. Like it just like was the problem that would not go away. And I imagine that identity theft could work in a very similar way, where if somebody like really steals your identity and says that something happened to you or that you live in this place now or whatever, it's a real uphill battle to prove that you're you and they're not.
Yeah. Excellent points. And I mean, obviously, so if you're, and let me go to our next slide here. If this happens to you as a customer, I mean, if it happens to you as an individual, you're upset to the situation. But if you can link it to it happened because your information was at Target or at Sears or at Home Depot, and that entity was hacked, you probably don't like that entity all that much. You're probably a little bit upset at that entity. But going forward to this question 2, Deshaun, I saw that you joined us. How you doing, Deshaun? Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm fine.
Well, why do you think, so Target found out on the 13th, and waited close to a week to tell customers, why do you think, not just Target, but why do you think firms may not want to let customers know that a data breach occurred?
I feel because they don't want to lose the trust of the customers. and they don't want to have a lawsuit or anything going towards them. They want to find out what the situation is before they actually let everybody know what's going on.
Okay. So we don't want to tell customers because we don't want to lose their trust.
Mm-hmm.
Correct? Okay.
Yes.
But in running with that line of thought,
You can lose
even
it
if we've
anyway.
been hacked, their customers stolen. There's no one doing that. We don't want to tell them because they don't want to lose their trust. But if we keep waiting day after day after day after day, and we don't tell them, they're eventually going to find out from the government, from us, or from the credit card companies saying, hey, your credit card's all used up. Hey, your credit score is now, 100. If they find out that we knew and we didn't tell them, isn't that going to probably be the ultimate form of mistrust?
Yes.
And so that's not a good situation to be in, obviously. Andrew, let me ask you, why else do you think firms do not want to let customers know that a data breach occurred that may have involved them?
Well, I think first, I think it does have to do with the money. I think if you let people know that you had a data breach, especially if you're a store, people are just going to stop shopping there. And what I talked about in my paper was Target made a lot of mistakes that cost them more and more money at each mistake. And I felt like it's one of those things where you try and prevent things from happening, prevent losing money, and you end up just losing more and more. And then the other thing I was thinking was, if you say that you had a data breach, you're going to have, depending on what you are, like if you're Target, millions of people overloading your customer service that you probably can't handle, trying to find out more information, and it's just going to cost you more and more money.
And I think a lot of times it's a trade-off. How can we win this moment right now? How can we look in the best possible light right now? But the better you try to portray yourself, the more you try to win that moment right now, you're winning that battle, you're probably losing the war. It's not a good long-term strategy. And it's uncomfortable. I mean, how would you like to be the person to get up there on, Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, whatever, and say, hey, all 200 million US customers, all your credit card information has been stolen. And we're telling you now, but it actually happened 2 weeks ago. And a lot of those customers, fictitious charges have been appearing. We don't know if it happened to you, but some of them. That's uncomfortable. It's a normal human psychological feeling. Well, for most people, some people like it, but most people don't like to tell people something bad because it's socially uncomfortable. Like when the waiter or the waitress comes over, how was your meal, sir? And you didn't really like it, but it wasn't like the worst meal ever. So you say it was good, even though you don't mean so, because you don't want to hurt that person's feelings. Some people don't care, but a lot of people, it's uncomfortable. So take that feeling. And not just, your crappy $10 hamburger, multiply that by 200 million customers and credit limits of 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 that may have been filled up. It's uncomfortable. It is really uncomfortable. Having said that, these people and the C-level suite, your CEO, your chief information officer, your chief financial officer, they don't get paid the big bucks simply to get paid the big bucks. They get paid the big bucks because they may be in some situations where it's going to be uncomfortable. And so we need these leaders to step up. Target was a good example. Probably, I like Target, but probably not what to do. And I'll talk more about probably what they should have done a little bit later. But it's common. And a lot of times there's probably going to be a back boardroom discussion before anybody knows. And ultimately, someone's going to be in that room is going to say, okay, how can we spin this? How can we, maybe we can't look good, but how can we spin this to make us look in the least negative light as possible? And that's not always the best way to go about this. And the best way to go about this is be proactive as possible. But Target actually was really proactive. But still, the alarms went off and Target didn't catch them. Brendan, was that you? Are you talking?
No, this is Morrow.
Morrow, how you doing?
Good. Question for you. How long, in your experience or your opinion, how long does the C-suite, like say, have, or how long does it take them to realize the extent of the breach, or how bad is it, so to speak? Is it we need immediately within one day we know how many people are affected? Is it take 1 week to get all the information? Because there's certain some time between when they want to alert the customer before they have all the information at hand.
There's no one magical answer. Every situation is different. If you're a firm that has absolutely no early warning alarms, bells and whistles, you're not going to know until the government comes along. Or if you're a firm like Target that has it, but you're not looking, or you're not using it correctly, you're not going to know for several days until the credit card company, other retailers, or the government comes knocking at the door. But as soon as you find out, that's kind of like, okay, I don't know what everyone's doing right now, but boardroom, 5 minutes, 911 style, like get in there, and you need to act quickly once you find out. So Marlo, I can't answer that. I don't know, because every organization is different. But I will say this: these attackers, they're trying to be stealthy. If they capture information, you find out an hour later, it's not going to do them much good. Maybe they can sell for a little bit, but they want time. They really try to cover their tracks as best as possible. So it is hard to find out. So there is probably going to be some lag time as to when they started and when you find out. But when you find out, it probably behooves you to go public as quickly as possible and not worry so much about, hey, how can we spin this to make us look good?
Gotcha. Yeah, I completely agree. I'm just trying to think of like being on the other side of the room, being in that boardroom saying, okay, well, what information do we need to gather first before, to avoid potentially spooking a customer or customers? So I think there is like some sort of time where you want to gather as much information as possible and to know the extent of the breach before you go public.
And it's outside the scope of this class, but this could be internal to large companies. Large companies will have an internal team. Medium, smaller size companies, they have agencies that they'll hire. Crisis management. So public relations people that simply dealing, that's what they specialize in. And they've got the playbook. They know exactly what to do, what to run, what to say. And that's when you want to involve, you know what, we can't spend a couple days figuring it out. We got to get the crisis management people right now. Make the phone call. We got to go public with this as quickly as possible. That would be my advice. But again, I mean, so your marketers, your managers, you may not be the PR people, but as long as you can take some of these principles with you, you can know the best way to act ethically. You don't want to look like a firm that acted unethically, that somehow tried to spin something to make yourself look positive, and in doing so, you further hurt some of your customers. You don't want to do that. And so we may have touched on this a little bit as we were talking about it. How do you think Target incorrectly handled the data breach? Stephanie, what do you think?
And I think like the first thing was that they had put a lot of money into having this security system to alert them to breaches, and then when it was giving them warnings, their people didn't trust the warnings and didn't follow up on them. It made me really curious about what the rollout and the training around the new security tools was, because it just seems like a classic example of like, you can have all the fancy tools in the world, but if your people aren't on board with them, what good does it do you? That was the first thing. And then I think sitting on the information for, I think it was only like 6 days or a week, but it just makes them look so not invested in their customers and so opaque, as opposed to being transparent. And even like, I imagine there's enormous pressure to figure out like what messages and to sound competent and, to get all your ducks in a row before you communicate anything publicly. But it seems like they should have been able to put something out within 48 hours, even if they didn't like understand the extent of everything that had happened, and at least like tell people something has gone wrong. Our number one priority is figuring out exactly what and communicating that to you, as opposed to being caught on their back foot.
And it is really easy to quickly contact people, because if they're your customers, if you have any type of customer database or loyalty program, you're going to have their email. I mean, instantly, just as soon as you craft your message from your